In the winter of 2021, a Kubota owner named Gary Ross carried his tractor to his dealer with a knock in the engine, and the desk quoted him $11,000, not to repair the motor, to replace it. The man at the counter told him the engine was finished and a rebuild was off the table, because Kubota, he said, would not permit one. Gary Ross wrote it down the way it was handed to him. The dealer says, "New motor. Kubota will not let them rebuild it. Has to be a new $11,000 Kubota motor." There were about 970 hours on that engine, nowhere near worn. Then, on the same public thread, a Kubota technician answered him and called the desk out cold. "If the engine is out of warranty," he wrote, "Kubota has no say in it, and your dealer is just trying to sell you a new engine rather than open up the one you have. Read that twice." One man at the counter said the engine was scrap. A Kubota technician said the engine was fixable, and the counter was selling a lie. That is the fork every one of you meets the day your own engine wears out. So this whole comparison comes down to one number and one question. The number is 10,000 hours, the mark a good compact diesel is built to reach, and most of them never see it. The question is which of these tractors you can bring back when you get there, and which leaves you holding a quote like Gary Ross's. Set his story against a number from the far end of the same machine. Yanmar's own marine dealers tell of a Japanese government boat still working on the diesel it left the factory with, the hour meter reading past 40,000 hours. 4 ordinary tractor lifetimes on a single engine, and it is still running. The reason so few tractors ever reach even 10,000 hours has nothing to do with the engine wearing out early. Too many are hauled off to the scrap line still fixable, thrown away for a repair the owner was told he could not make. Run the arithmetic the way the man at the desk never will. A rural property owner puts about 200 hours a year on a compact tractor. 200 hours a year and 10,000 hours is 50 years down the road. 50 years. You will wear out the seat, the tires, the loader, and 2 coats of paint, and the engine will still be sitting under that hood. So the next question is the only one that ever mattered. You are going to own this machine long enough to reach the day it wears out, and on that day, a shop hands you one of 2 answers. Bring it back for the price of a good weekend and a few $100s in parts, or haul it off and finance the whole machine again, the way Gary Ross was told to. Same tractor on the lot today, same paint, same money. 2 very different machines the day they wear, and nobody at that desk will tell you which one you are signing for. So this is a comparison of the 3 companies that forge the diesels under most of these tractors. Kubota, which builds its own. Yanmar, the company behind that 40,000-hour boat. And Kioti, the American name on an engine built by a Korean company called Daedong. Behind a dozen paint colors on that lot, the block traces back to this short list of real engine houses, and these 3 are the ones worth knowing by name. 50 years and 10,000 hours from now, which of the 3 can you still be keeping alive in your own county? And which one is scrap iron the day it wears? One of them is the answer, and it is the last thing I'm going to tell you. 3 things decide it, and not one of them is printed on the sheet at the desk. The first is whether the engine is built to come apart and go back together. A diesel that reaches high hours almost always gets there with a rebuild somewhere in the middle. New rings and bearings, the cylinders bored back to true, and fitted with a set of larger pistons. A rebuild is not the mark of a bad engine. It is the normal middle chapter of a long life, the way a new roof is the middle chapter of a good house. An engine you can rebuild has a second life waiting in it. An engine with no parts made to rebuild it is scrapped the day it wears, no matter how good when new. The second is how old and how deep the real record is. Actual machines and actual fields with the hours on the meter to prove it, not a figure in a brochure. The third is whether a real engine company stands behind the part, the kind still selling you a gasket set 20 years after you drove the tractor home. And a fair word before the ranking starts. No engine maker prints a table that lines these 3 up head to head on how long they live. Nobody publishes that number at all. So this order does not come off a lab sheet. It runs on the three things just named, the things a buyer can see and check for himself. Start with the youngest bloodline on the lot, and youngest is the fair word, because this is no weak engine. Daedong, the Korean company that forges the Kioti diesel, wrote its own multi-cylinder diesel back in 1983, and the Kioti name did not open its American doors until 1993. That is a little over 30 years of tractors in this country. Daedong forges the engine, the transmission, and the tractor under one roof, which is more than most names on that lot can say, and a well-kept Kioti gives you 4,000 to 6,000 hours of honest work, and then some, right in line with anything in its class. So why does it sit at the bottom of three good engines? Because of the two things it has the least of, and both of them come down to time. The other two names were selling tractors in this country years before Kioti ever opened its doors, and a diesel's record is only as long as the oldest one still running and proving it. Then there is the rebuild. When a small Daedong wears out at the end, the shelf of parts to bring it back is the thinnest of the three, and more owners drop in a whole replacement engine than bore the old one back, because that is where the parts supply pushes them. None of that makes it a bad buy. It makes it the one with the least proven behind it, in a comparison that is all about proof. Here is a question worth stopping for the men who have owned one of these a long time. What is the most hours you have ever put on a single tractor engine? And when it came time for real work, did you rebuild it or replace it? That answer from somebody who reached the far end of one of these is worth more to the man shopping today than any figure I can read off a page. Leave it in the comments where he will find it. Now to the deepest record of the three, Yanmar, and the place to start is a parts shelf. The little gray market Yanmar tractors that came into this country in the 1970s and 80s, machines older than half the people shopping for one today, are still running, still working ground, and still, 40 years on, rebuildable. You can order an in-frame rebuild kit for one of those old engines right now, off a shelf, for under $600. An engine with parts still made for it 4 decades on has proven the one thing this comparison cares about. It does not turn into a throwaway. That is the record behind the name. Yanmar's own marine dealers put 10,000 hours down as a routine target for the engine. Not a best case, and the government boat from the opening is theirs, working past 40,000 hours on a single Yanmar block, when the standard figure for a well-kept marine diesel of that stripe is about 8,000. By every measure named so far, Yanmar looks like the answer. Hold that thought, because it does not finish on top, and the reason has nothing to do with the engine. Which brings in the last of the three, Kubota, and here the place to start is the counter you already drive past. Walk into a parts counter anywhere in this country, and ask for a set of oversized pistons and rings for the common Kubota 3-cylinder. They will have it, or have it in 2 days, for a little over $400. Fresh cylinder liners the same. When a Kubota wears at the end of a long life, a shop bores the cylinders back to true, fits the oversized parts, and hands you the same engine with another life in it, for the price of a good weekend instead of the price of a new machine. And there's a plain reason those parts are never a special order. Kubota is an engine company that happens to sell tractors, not the other way around. It builds diesels for other manufacturers all over the world, up to 210 horsepower, and the same Kubota diesel sits inside thousands of other machines, skid steers, mowers, generators, excavators. Parts made in that kind of volume stay cheap, stay stocked, and do not go out of print while the machines are still out in the field. On the hours alone, Kubota runs right with the others, 4,500 to 5,500 on average. Plenty past 10,000, the industrial units into the tens of thousands before anybody opens them up. But this comparison never turned on an hours figure. So put the three in order, the way the man signing the note should. Third is Kioti, a real engine, built right under one roof, held back only by the shortest record and the thinnest rebuild shelf of the three. Give it another 20 years, and this may read another way. Second is Yanmar, and second is no insult. It owns the deepest longevity record here, and nothing said takes a single hour of that away. But a buyer has to keep the machine alive for 50 years in his own county. And the parts for those gray market Yanmars move through a handful of specialty importers, not the counter down the road. The engine will outlast you. Keeping it supported close to home for half a century is the harder road of the two at the top, which puts Kubota first. Kubota does not hold more hours than a Yanmar. On the raw record, it does not. It wins for one reason. No shop ever tells you to throw one away. The block comes apart and goes back together. The oversized parts to do it sit on a shelf in every farm town in the country, and a real engine company will still be selling them long after the tractor around them has gone gray. Run it out to the far end. 50 years and 10,000 hours from now, a worn Kioti is often a whole replacement engine. A worn Yanmar is a phone call to a specialty importer, and a worn Kubota is a Saturday, $400 in parts, and the same engine running come Monday. Set that against the 11,000 on Gary Ross's desk, and the whole comparison fits in one line. His engine was fixable. The desk had a new motor to sell. So before you sign for any of it, do the 3 things that tell you whether you are buying an engine you can keep. First, find out who forges the diesel under that hood, by the maker's name, not by the color of the tractor. Second, ask the parts man one plain question. When this engine wears at high hours, can I buy oversized pistons and new liners for it? And how long will they take to get here? A yes, and soon, means you are holding an engine with a second life in it. A long pause means you are holding a machine with an expiration date. Nobody printed on the tag. Third, weigh the record. Ask how many years that exact engine has been running in this country, and how far the oldest ones have gone. Because the engine was almost never going to be your problem. A good compact diesel will outrun the man who buys it, every single time. One question ever mattered. On the day it wears out, 50 years and 10,000 hours from now, is it a rebuild you can hold in your 2 hands, or a loss you push out to the scrap line? That is the difference between the tractor Gary Ross was standing in front of and the one the desk tried to sell him. Buy the engine you can keep alive. The badge on the hood was never the part that was going to last.